Namaste and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Sunday service. Om Yo Brahmanam Vidadhati Purvam Yo Vai Vedangscha Prahinoti Tasmai Tam Hadevam Atma Buddhi Prakasham Mumukshur Vai Sharanamaham Prapadye. We who seek liberation take refuge in that infinite light which illuminates the hearts of all, which is the source of the Creator himself and the repository of the infinite knowledge, the Veda. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om Peace, Peace, Peace be unto us all. So first, let me recognize the special day that today is, and that is Guru Purnima, and the day when the Guru is celebrated in the Hindu tradition. A very important tradition, a very important concept, a very important practice. And the recognition of the importance in all aspects of life of the teacher. The first guru is said to be one's mother. The second guru is one's father. And then after that, we have a variety of teachers through life. And then there's the guru who gives us spiritual knowledge. And so that is considered the most sacred of all relationships. The only relationship that is more sacred than the familial relationship. And so our salutation to the great teachers of the past and the great teachers of the present, those who give us spiritual knowledge. But the topic this morning is not the Guru. I'm going to speak on Vedanta and American ideals. And the reason for the topic is, of course, that yesterday was the 4th of July, a day which is not just important, but you could say is sacred in America. In India, certainly, there's the recognition of the sacred element within everything. In America, being a secular country and a religious country, yes, compared to European countries, America is still a religious country, but not a country with a tradition of making events sacred. But the 4th of July is as close as we get to a sacred national day. Of course, Christmas is widely celebrated by the majority of the people in the country, the great majority of the people. But that's recognized as a religious holiday, not a national holiday. But the 4th of July is as close as we get to a sacred national day. So it's important to us not just because of that, because of the founding of America and the American ideals which were given expression to in the Declaration of Independence. But it's also important to us because it was the day when Swami Vivekananda chose to leave his physical body, to merge into the infinite, to merge into God, and not to return to his physical body. He consciously chose the 4th of July, and it appears that he chose it because of its American associations, the association of freedom. So I could give the alternate title, instead of Vedanta and American Ideals, I could give the title just as well, Vivekananda and American Ideals. So both titles are appropriate. I put Vedanta and American Ideals only because it was the Vedanta principles that Swami Vivekananda gave as the foundation, philosophical and spiritual foundation for American democracy. So, let me first begin by speaking about American ideals as stated in the Declaration of Independence. So that document begins, actually there's a short beginning before this, but the important part of it, the actual statement begins, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So this is a remarkable document, and every word within it, especially in this beginning portion, is significant. After the part that I'm going to read, then they come to the political issues of the day, the reasons why the colonists had decided to seek independence or fight for independence, not ask for, but to demand independence from England. But the beginning states these principles which they held as universal, and that's the remarkable thing about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That is, that if we look at humanity, look within ourselves, look outside, then they believed that these truths were self-evident. They didn't need to be found in a sacred text. They didn't need to be justified by our ancestors. They believed that it was in the nature of things. And yet these truths had never been fully recognized before and never been fully instituted as the governing principles of a nation. So we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and of course, obviously that was a non-gendered use of men, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. So all are created equal. Now that, of course, is not obvious, and we'll talk more about that later. But let me just state here that that part is not obvious. It was felt to be obvious at that time because it was the belief that if everyone were given equal opportunity, that people had the basic possibilities within them. But as we know now, because of heredity and so forth, we know that not everyone has the same capacities, that people are born in life with great differences. But Swami Vivekananda pointed to the locus of true equality where all are equal, and that is in their own inner reality, that they are, all people are equal, and that is a truth. And so then he goes on that endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that is, that each person has unalienable rights, rights which cannot be taken away, rights which should not be taken away, rights which are the birthright of every person, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the right to life. The right to not have that life taken away from you by others because of their whims. Liberty, that is freedom of movement, freedom of self-expression, etc., and the pursuit of happiness. That which all people seek is happiness, and so people have the unalienable right to pursue happiness. That to secure these rights, he goes on, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now that is an amazing statement, and we'll come in a little bit to a statement of Swami Vivekananda's about this, that to secure these rights, that is, these unalienable rights which are self-evident in every person, governments are established to secure these rights. No, that was never done before. Governments were established by a political game of King on the Mountain. When we were kids, we used to play the game King on the Mountain. That is, however small the hill, somebody would go up and sit on the hill, and everybody would try to pull him off and sit themselves there. And so whoever could stay on the hill longest would win. So you're king of the hill. So that's the way governments were established. Whoever was strongest, whoever was boldest, and then that tended to become hereditary. and the hereditary lineage was protected by armies until somebody got a bigger army and pushed the king off of his hill and then sat on the throne. And so that's the way governments were established, and that's the way, whether it was at the tribal level or at the civilizational level. And so the strong man would win out. But here it says that governments are established to secure the rights of these people. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to abolish it. That was never part of the bargain among governing peoples. That the people, if they found that the government was not serving the collective ends of the people, that they had the right to get rid of the government and start over, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Safety, again, for the pursuit of life and liberty, and happiness for the pursuit of happiness. So again, it's a remarkable document, and I could give a whole talk just on this beginning of the document. And basically what I'm going to do today is an expansion of these ideas, so though I won't keep referring back to this document. So coming to Swami Vivekananda, one of the great contributions he made to social thought was the idea that every country and every civilization embodies an idea, and that idea is its life. And so he would say of India, that India in ancient times, in very ancient times, from the time of the Vedas and perhaps before the Vedas, India had chosen God, spirituality, as its idea, its reason for existence. And that as long as India held to that, that India would survive as a civilization and would prosper as a civilization. In a similar way, China, another ancient civilization, is the expression of an idea which you see running all through its history. And so with other countries, and in America, of course, there is an idea also, and that the central idea is expressed here. But one of the remarkable things about America, and let me say, I'm speaking mostly in praise of America today. You can find faults with any country, and you can find greatness of any country. And so I'm not saying that America is greater than all other countries. No, other countries, every country has something which America does not have. And America has something which other countries don't have. That's the way that the diverse universe works in every field. And so today, because we're celebrating American independence and Swami Vivekananda's independence on that same day, I'm speaking in terms about the ideals of America. So it's not meant to denigrate other countries or to say that America is greater than other countries. No. But it is a fact that America, at least as far as we know, America was the first country to be founded on an idea. Other countries evolved. There were people living there. They formed first tribal bands and tribal governments, and then gradually, through the growth of agriculture, the towns and then cities grew, and they had to be managed. They had to be governed, and then a collection of cities came to be a state. Until in modern times you come to the modern nation state, which is only a few centuries old. It's a relatively recent development in history. But in all of these cases, these countries, these tribal bands, these towns, these cities, and these countries developed along some idea. But that was something which evolved as the people and their culture evolved along with this, their geographical and climatic conditions, etc. But America, as far as I know, was the first country that was founded on an idea. It didn't start out just people living here, and gradually some sort of collective idea arose among the people unconsciously. But there was the deliberate attempt to found a country on a particular idea. So what is that idea? Well, of course, the central idea is the idea of democracy. And democracy, of course, means the rule of the people, rule by the people, rule of the people, by the people, and for the people. We'll come back to that expression, which comes from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address a little later. So that idea of that expressed in the Declaration of Independence, the governments are established for the sake of the people, for the government of the people by their own consent, as it said. Let me come back to that. In fact, let me leave this out so that I can refer back to it. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So that was the idea. And so the democracy is an expression of that idea, that since a government is established for the purpose of governing the people by their consent, then the people have to be involved in the running of the government. The people have to have their say. And so that is the meaning of democracy. In a little bit, I'll come to Swami Vivekananda's spiritual foundation for that idea, but that's the basic idea. And then along with the idea of democracy was the ideal of equality. And it's because of equality that therefore you have democracy. If people were not equal, if some were more equal than others, as the expression goes, deliberate contradiction, if some people were more equal, that is, if some people were greater than others, as was generally recognized throughout societies around the world for thousands of years, then they had the right to govern, because they were greater, they were more important than other people. So they had the right to govern. But if all people are created equal, then all people should have a say in the government. And so it's equality, which the idea of equality of all human beings that expresses itself in democracy. And along with that comes the idea of the empowerment of the people. All of these ideas are closely tied together. You can't have one without the other. The empowerment of the people. That is, that if people are equal, if government exists for the sake of the people and at the consent of the people, and therefore the people are involved in the governing process itself, then that means that the people have to be empowered. All of the population has to be empowered. So it means, again, that the government has to be answerable to the people. So Swami Vivekananda says this in a Bengali writing that he contributed to the Udbodhan, the Bengali journal that was founded by Swami Trigunatitananda with Swamiji's blessing. Swamiji wrote several things for the Udbodhan journal, and this is one which was entitled Modern India. It's a long piece, and so I've taken just a selection pertinent to what we're discussing now. And he says, the subjects in both Buddhist and Hindu India have no, and he's talking about historically, because this was in the context of speaking about the ancient history of India. The subjects in both Hindu and Buddhist India have no direct voice in any matter of governance through any recognized rule of the state. That is, the populace had no say in their rule. The power of the populace expresses its influence unconsciously and without method. That is, there's no process for the people to express their influence. And so whatever influence there is of the people, then it expresses itself unconsciously and without method. The people are not yet even aware that they have power. That is, because they haven't been empowered. So they don't even have the idea that they have power. There is no effort at joining together in collaborative effort, nor do they wish to do so. Completely lacking is that capacity to unite small centers of power into one insuperable force. So this he's talking about the situation in ancient India and through the course of Indian history up until modern times. So he goes to discuss why that is the case. A want of proper law is not the problem. So it's not because of proper law that India didn't develop that sense of the power of the common people. There are laws, there are methods. All is apportioned and assessed. There are meticulous rules in India governing the collection of revenue, ancient India, governing the collection of revenue, the maintenance of the army, the administration of justice, the dispensing of punishments and rewards. So all of this was provided for in the Hindu law books. But at the root of all is the injunction of the rishi, the sage, possessing divine power, filled with God. So the rishi instituted these laws, and the rishi was considered to be divinely inspired. And so his laws would therefore be considered divinely inspired. The laws therefore have practically no flexibility. So here you see Swamiji's modern mind at work. He recognized that yes, these rishis were great. He had great love and reverence for the rishis, but he saw a problem that because the rishis were so respected, that the laws that they gave could not be broken, nor could they even be adjusted, because they were given by these great men who were we to mess with the rules of the rishis, and so everything became static. The laws, therefore, have practically no flexibility. Under these circumstances, it is not possible to teach the people to join in a common effort to secure their own general welfare. How could you teach them to join together in a common effort? The rules are already laid down by the rishis, and no one can question them. Or to join their minds to conceive of a popular right over the treasures collected by the king from his subjects, and to aspire after the right of representation in the control of state revenues and expenditures. Here he's indirectly speaking of the very cause of the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence. It was one of the central complaints. There were a number of complaints listed, but one of the central complaints was that England was ruling the colonies without the consent of the colonies and was taxing the colonies without the colonies having any voice in the taxation or in the distribution of the revenues from taxation. So here Swamiji is saying that that was the case in ancient India, and it was accepted because, again, everything was instituted by the rishis. He goes on, it is reasonable to expect that in a society controlled by scriptural injunctions, born of the spiritual wisdom of great souls, which he accepted, good governance should flow unimpeded to the king and subjects, the rich and the poor, the ignorant and the educated alike. Yes, you would expect that to happen because of the way that the injunctions had come down from the great rishis. But how that has worked out in India and is working out in practice has already been discussed. In another part of this long essay, he talks about the fact that in spite of all of these great laws, there were many despotic rulers, a few great rulers, of course, the most shining example, Ramachandra, and a few like Ashoka, Dharma Ashoka, as he was called, and Akbar as well. But he said that the majority were more like Aurangzeb, who, as he says in the essay, lived off of the blood of his subjects. The consent of the governed in their governance, again, going back to the Declaration of Independence. The consent of the governed in their governance is the watchword of the modern Western world, the ultimate expression of which has been declared with the voice of thunder in the American Declaration of Independence, government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now here, Swamiji lived in a day when there was no internet and certainly no Google, and he wrote this while he was in India, and so he didn't have the Declaration of Independence at hand. So these words are not from the Declaration of Independence. They actually come from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address in 1863. Government of the people, that is, government is government of the people. You're governing the people. But by the people, it's the people themselves who are governing themselves. For the people, that is, for the sake and for the welfare and for the health, safety, prosperity of the people. So a unique idea. So Lincoln said in his Gettysburg Address, which also is highly pertinent here, 87 years ago, this was in 1863 during the Civil War, and so 87 years earlier would have been 1776. 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. We here highly resolve that these dead, those who had died in the battle on the battlefield in Gettysburg, we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. So those are the beautiful words of Abraham Lincoln. But the idea Swamiji was conveying here. So here he's talking about the situation in ancient India and up until Indian independence. It was still the condition under the British. It had been the condition also under Muslim rule, but it was also the condition under both Hindu and Buddhist rule from ancient times, that the common people had no say in their governance, nor did they even have the idea that they should. And that wasn't just India, that was around the world. So this was a new idea which, of course, didn't come out of nowhere, but that was conceived by the founders, Thomas Jefferson and other founders, because of sentiments which had been growing and developing in the period called the Enlightenment. The revolution took place at the time of the historical period called the European Enlightenment. Now, let me jump to another passage of Swami Vivekananda, where he says in his lecture, Is Vedanta the Future Religion?, given in San Francisco in 1900, he develops this idea and again gives the spiritual significance of American democracy. He says, the God of Vedanta is not the monarch, the king, that is, not the monarch sitting on a throne entirely apart. There are those who like their God that way, a God to be feared and propitiated. That is, God is separate, ruling the universe from his throne in heaven, ruling everything here. The God of Vedanta, he says, is not that, a monarch sitting on the throne. They burn candles and crawl in the dust before him. Typical of religious practice. They want a king to rule them. They believe in a king in heaven to rule them all. The king is gone from this country, America, at least. Where is the king of heaven? Just where the earthly king is. In this country, the king has entered every one of you. You are all kings in this country. So with the religion of Vedanta, you are all gods. One God is not sufficient. You are all gods, says Vedanta. So again, this extraordinary idea where Swamiji is drawing this parallel, that in this country, the king had been taken down from the throne, and the king had entered all of the citizens, that is, the empowerment of the citizens to govern themselves for their own sake. Whereas before, the idea was that the king or the queen was the value in society. The ancient citizens of Europe, they or I shouldn't say ancient, because in Western history that takes us back to Greece and Rome. But in classical times in Europe, then the king or the queen was the value of society. A person asked or had to know, who is my king and how do I serve them? Because the king was the value. But now the king had been taken from the throne and had entered into the people. The people were empowered. You are all kings in this country. So with the religion of Vedanta, you are all gods. This makes Vedanta very difficult. It does not teach the old idea of God at all. In place of that God who sat above the clouds and managed the affairs of the world without asking our permission, who created us out of nothing just because he liked it, and made us undergo all of this misery just because he liked it, Vedanta teaches the God that is in everyone, has become everyone and everything. His Majesty the King has gone from this country. The kingdom of heaven went from Vedanta hundreds of years ago. There is a chance of Vedanta becoming the religion of your country because of democracy. But it can become so only if you can and do clearly understand it. If you become real men and women, not people with vague ideas and superstitions in your brains, and if you want to be truly spiritual, since Vedanta is concerned only with spirituality. So here you see these powerful words of Swamiji where he ties the basic principles of non-dualistic Vedanta to American democracy. This, I feel, will in future times become one of the founding statements of America. America is still a young country. And so just as the Vedas were composed over a long historical period, so we are still in the process of founding this country, especially right now, today, when we seem to have lost our way in so many ways. Then this vision is so necessary for America, for the health of America. So along with this, you see the emergence of the individual. Swamiji used to criticize the shallow idea of individuality that Americans worshipped. But he liked the idea of the individual expression of the infinite. That is, that each person is a unique expression of the infinite reality. And so that Swamiji appreciated, that Swamiji liked. He criticized the idea of American individuality, where individuality was based on one's peculiarities, that, oh, I like this and I like that, and I do this and I do that, I don't like that and I don't like the other thing, and I don't do these things. So my individuality is based on all of these insignificant things. He said real individuality is rooted in the infinite. And if we find that, if we find the universal, then we become individual expressions of that universal. He told his followers, his disciples and brother disciples in India, that Sri Ramakrishna was a master gardener. Each of his disciples is a perfected individual, and that's what we want. We want that individuality. We want to develop that individuality. So again, when you read in Swamiji and see him criticizing individuality, what he's criticizing is a superficial view of individuality. A view of individuality where it's separated from everybody else. No, each is a unique expression of the universal. So democracy, equality, all of these are the empowerment of the people. All of these are part of the American ideal. And of course, freedom. Freedom is an essential part that comes along with the statement in the Declaration of Independence and comes along with the idea of democracy and with the idea of equality. All of these ideas are intimately connected to each other. And freedom, of course, was the watchword of Swami Vivekananda, is what he spoke about in all fields. He said that freedom is the only condition of growth. He said there must be individual freedom, there must be social freedom, and there must be spiritual freedom. Freedom of the body, freedom of the mind, freedom of the spirit. At all levels, he said, freedom must be cultivated because it is the soil in which growth can take place. So freedom in America included, of course, it was conceived of in political and social terms, and it included the right to self-government, of course, the freedom from England, the balance of powers was established between the three branches of government so that no one would become dominating and become tyrannical over the others. The balance of powers was established in order to keep a balance in the government so that the people could remain in charge. That also is under threat today in the U.S. Until the end of the Civil War in the United States, there was a fear in the U.S. of, and among the founders of the country, a fear of corporations, because it was seen that corporate power could take over individual power, and that we see today. We see that corporations are given the rights of individuals, but they don't have the responsibility of individuals. That is contrary to the very founding idea of the United States. The idea of corporate power, where corporations have, since the Civil War, have gradually taken more and more and more power until now they're granted freedom of speech in the sense that the corporation can give money to control elections because that is freedom of speech. Freedom of speech was never given to institutions. It was, the locus of it was the individual, that we have the freedom of speech to express ourselves. So, and there was, until the late 19th century, there was fear of financial institutions. One of the big arguments in the beginning of the country was over the establishment of banks. And so, of course, banking institutions were found to be necessary. And in a healthy country, there have to be financial institutions. But gradually in the 20th century, we've seen the financial institutions take over more and more of the power, so that now financial institutions and large corporations have far, far more power than any individual in this country. In fact, recent studies have shown that the government doesn't respond to the wishes of the people. It responds to the wishes of moneyed interests and corporations. The people, a majority of people, want a number of good things for the welfare of the country. Corporations and financial institutions don't want that. And so those things are not given to the people. So these were things that were seen by the founders as dangers to the country, and their vision has come true. So political freedom, the individual freedom, there was social freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. All of these were given, all of these were expected to be granted to the people. At the time of the Constitution, the women and non-white people were not included in these freedoms. One of the things that you see in the Declaration of Independence is that the statement is remarkable because it was generalized. The people who wrote it, including Thomas Jefferson, he recognized in his greatness. He's much criticized nowadays because, yes, he held slaves. And yes, that it was a horrible human institution. But we can't allow that to blind us to the greatness of the man, that he didn't let that come into his statement in the Declaration of Independence. He said all men, and of course by men he meant ungendered, not just males, that all men are created equal. He didn't say all white men are created equal. No, and he didn't mean all white males are created equal. No, he said all men are created equal in the most generalized sense. And so in time, it was recognized that since the founding of the country, we had not lived up to our ideals. And so women were given free, the vote, and gradually women attained more and more freedom. Native Americans were given the rights of citizenship, and African Americans were given the rights of citizenship. And that fight is still going on. The fight for the equality of women, the fight for the equality of African Americans, Latin Americans, Native Americans, and other minorities. That fight is still going on because this is an ideal, but because the ideal in its purity was presented at the beginning, even if the founders didn't live up to it. It was given in its purity in the beginning, and so it gives us something to strive towards, to work towards. So now, excuse me. A couple of other things that Swamiji loved about America, which are not part of the founding statement in the Declaration of Independence, but which he loved. One was the practicality of the people, that Yankee can-do spirit, the idea that things can be fixed. We can do things. We can collectively and individually, we can do that which needs to be done. That's a great thing. Swamiji comments on it in a letter. I forget who he was writing to, but he was writing from Greenacre Conference in Maine. And he mentions the fact that there was a big tempest which had blown over the camp. People were camping there at Greenacre for an interreligious camp where he had been invited as one of the guest teachers. And the tents were blown down, the chairs were blown over. And so he said it was wonderful to see the people gathering together to fix everything. They weren't deterred by the disturbance of the natural storm happening, the storm. But the practicality of the people he praises highly. So the practicality and strength, quality which America has always striven to respect, that is strength of the people. And so Swamiji also, strength and fearlessness were two of the qualities which he spoke about the most, and spoke about with the greatest insistence that these are necessary. So all of these qualities are things that Swamiji himself loved. Swamiji saw that, though he didn't express this, I'm extrapolating from study of Swamiji. It seems to me that Swamiji saw that India and America were like, in some ways, were mirror images of each other. The strengths of one were the weaknesses of the other, and the strengths of the other were the weaknesses of the first. And so the joining of these two countries, he saw the culture of these countries, he saw as very promising. In fact, his brother disciple, Swami Trigunatitananda, who came after Swamiji's passing, who came to San Francisco and lived there till his passing away in 1915, Swami Trigunatitanandaji, he used to encourage intercultural marriages between Americans and Indians, something which this was back at the beginning of the 20th century, in the 1910s, which at that time here was quite radical, and in India was even more radical. But he encouraged that because he felt that, he used to say that India and America are two countries of destiny, and that the joining of these two countries would do great good to themselves and to the world. So Swamiji was not just all praise of America. He excoriated America for its weaknesses, for its lapses, its flaws, and so forth. But Swamiji could do that because Swamiji loved America. And so it was on that foundation of love that his strong criticisms and scoldings could be born and could bear good fruit. He saw that what America needed, for one thing, was a spiritual foundation to its ideals, as I've already spoken about. the idea of equality, the idea of democracy, the idea of the empowerment of the individual, that all of these had to be deepened, that they were founded on philosophically shallow ground that couldn't sustain them. And so they need to be founded where true equality lies, in the self of every being. Every human being, not just human beings, every being, but speaking of human beings, because that's where we have human society, every human being is the Atman, pure, perfect divinity right here, right now. As Swamiji said, the man in your country, speaking to Americans, the man in your country who is going to be hung for murder is perfect to God, perfect to God. It's just that he doesn't know it, and therefore he does things out of ignorance, which brings terrible harm to others and karmic harm to himself. But that doesn't negate the fact of his being, which is perfect divinity, here and now. So that was the locus of equality, and that is the locus of strength. All power is within you, Swamiji would tell people over and over in various ways. Once there was a man who had known Swamiji in his youth, in, of course, Bengal, in Calcutta. And Swamiji, when he came back from America to Calcutta, this man contacted him and said, Swamiji, I would love to see you. We knew each other as youngsters, and I have followed your career, and I have great love and admiration for you, and it would do me so much good to see you, but I can't come because I'm suffering from a strange illness. I can't get out of bed. I'm so debilitated, no one knows what it is that's wrong with me, but if it's possible, I would love to see you. So Swamiji went to see him, and he began to chant, and the man began to feel strength pouring into his body, and he overcame the weakness which had debilitated him just by Swamiji's presence and his blessing. And Swamiji brought strength to everybody. He brought out the strength within everybody. But that strength comes from a spiritual source. It's not strength of the muscles, not strength to hit somebody and knock them out. No, it's the strength, the power of the spirit, which is far stronger than muscular power. A true individuality, that also he showed. He said that true individuality is consistent with and founded on selflessness. True individuality is not self-expression in the Western sense of self-expression, expressing my ego, etc. True individuality comes through selflessness, where the universal self expresses itself through the unique constellation of a person's qualities. And so he used to say that the best work comes out of us when we are unselfish. So that unselfishness also he saw as a great need in America, something that there were certain flaws he saw in the American character that could be cured by the medicine of Indian spirituality, Vedantic spirituality. One, of course, most obvious is materialism, the materialism which this country still suffers from. But he saw that Indian Vedantic spirituality was the solution to that materialism, and I feel in time that will win the day. The externalized mind that you find in the West, and in America in particular, the externalizing of the mind. Everything is always drawing the mind outward. So no, the Vedanta says we must learn to control the mind from within, and to go outward only with inner permission, not to be pulled outward by the outer world, but to maintain self-control, inner control, to control the externalized mind. The importance of thought before action. In America, more than in Europe, action has been praised. They're a country of active people that who want to be up and doing. Swamiji liked that up to a point, but he saw that also was founded on a shallow idea, was founded on a personal restlessness, inability to sit quietly. And so he emphasized the importance of thought coming before action, of deep thought, deep reflection, and out of that, true action can come. So There are certain dangers facing America today, which Swamiji didn't. Some of them he saw the seeds of. Others are much more recent problems. One, of course, which he saw the seeds of in his time, was public morality. That is something that is weakening the country. As Swamiji said, that it's the morality of a people that gives the people an inner strength and a lasting power. That without that, then the dissipation of energy that you see through the public immorality in the country of all types, that is going to bring ruin to the civilization. The breakdown of the family. And yes, by that, I'm not using that as a code word, as some conservative religious preachers do, for meaning husband and wife family. No, there is room for expanding the concept of family. But the family is the basic unit of society, and however it is that society decides to conceive of the family unit is the basis of all social life. It's the basis of the nurturing of children and the upbringing of children, the training of the next generation. And unless the family unit is strong, however it comes to be conceived, unless the family unit is strong, society can't be strong. Children need parents. And they need a strong, secure home that gives them the feeling of being loved, the feeling of being protected, the feeling of being secure. Without that, a society can't last. The society begins to fall apart. So part of the breakdown of the family is part of a larger problem, the loss of commitment, the sense of commitment. And that is just in 50 years, 60 years, I've seen that disappear from American life. It used to be in the workplace that if you gave your best years to a company, the company returned it to you by giving you security. There's no such tie between worker and employer at the present time. People like Alan Greenspan tell graduating seniors from college that you have to be ready to change your career at least 4 times during your life. Not your place of employment, your career. You have to be ready to change 4 times. Why? Because there's no commitment. There's no commitment to anything. Part of the problem is the rapid changes in society, but part of it is the lack of commitment in the family, lack of commitment in the workplace, and it affects all aspects of life. It affects monastic recruitment as well. People no longer want to become monks. They no longer want to become priests because it means a lifelong vow. So many young people, good young people I've seen, promising young people I've seen, who come and say, I would love to try out monastic life, but I don't want to take any vows because I'll try it for a few years, but after that I might want to do something else. That's not monastic life. And so if society loses that ability to commit, if the people lose the ability to commit to something good, commit to something consciously, commit from the inside because I want it, not because somebody tells me I have to. But if we lose that ability, we're losing a fundamental stabilizing factor in society and in individual life. And also today we find much more than in Swamiji's time, words are losing their meaning. Truth is losing its meaning. When you have alternative facts, when words don't mean anything, when you say whatever you want to say and it doesn't matter whether it's true or false, then words have lost their meaning, truth has lost its meaning. When you make an agreement with somebody and the agreement is just a casual agreement that can be broken anytime you want to, then again you have the problem of commitment and the problem of truth being compromised. There's the problem of imperial ambitions of the country at large, not of the people, but of the country and the vested interests, the imperial ambitions in the country. People may say, well, you're getting into politics. No, I'm not speaking of it from a political standpoint. I'm speaking of it from the standpoint of life and of the ideal, and from the fact that no imperial power lasts. Every imperial power ends by destroying itself. And so it's a moral principle. It's not it may be expressed politically, but it's a moral principle. Swami Vivekananda said at the Parliament of Religions, "Hail Columbia." I don't remember the exact wording, but the idea was this: "Hail Columbia," that is, "Hail America," which was sometimes addressed as Columbia. "Hail Columbia, the land of liberty, which never found that the quickest way to get rich was to dip its hand into the blood of others." That's no longer true. That's no longer true. How many times we've dipped our hand into the blood of other nations in destructive ways. So that the imperial ambitions of America, Swamiji was very much against that, and he spoke out against it. He spoke out in America at the time of the Spanish-American War. He said that, do you know that there are preachers in New York, Christian preachers, who are teaching, who are advocating for the invasion and takeover of the Philippines. Why? To make them Christian. But they're already Christian. But the problem is for this preacher that they're Catholic Christians. And so we should take over the country and make them Protestant Christians. So such a horrible thing the country is about to do just to convert them from one form of the same religion to another form. So Swamiji spoke out against that publicly. And another tremendous problem in the country that's destroying the ideals of the country is money and politics. That's a serious problem. Again, you may say, well, Swami, you're getting into politics and you shouldn't do that. No, I know that I shouldn't go into politics, but this is a principle. This is the destruction of the country. If it's been politicized, too bad for the politicians. That's contrary to the ideals of the country, and it will destroy the country. So there are all of these problems, and yet I have the faith that the country will overcome these problems. It will take time. It will take time because some of these bad roads we have gone down a long, long ways, and it will be difficult to come back from them. But we can do it because the ideals are true and the ideals are good. But mostly because they were blessed by the great Swami Vivekananda, who blessed this country, who gave his best years to this country, who worked for the spiritual uplift of this country. And so that a blessing of a great soul like Swami Vivekananda, that can't go in vain. He loved the country. He loved the people. He saw the flaws of the people, but he gave the medicine that was needed. He saw the flaws of the system, but he gave the medicine which was needed. And he loved the ideal so much that it was on the 4th of July that he chose to leave his body in deep meditation and not to come back, to enter into his independence, his full spiritual freedom on a day in which Americans celebrate independence. So let me conclude with a letter, passage of a letter from Swamiji to Mary Hale, written from London in 1896. He had gone from America to London the second time, before he went from Europe on to India. So here he has a line which is critical of India. I'll read it because it's in context, but that shouldn't be taken. Swamiji loved India more than any country. So here, because it was consistent with Swamiji's way, that when he was speaking in a particular mood, then that was everything, and everything else was pushed to the side. So just take it in context. He says, but it is to Amérique, he used the French word for America, but it is to Amérique that there is where the heart is. I love the Yankee land. I like to see new things. I do not care a fig to loaf about old ruins and mope a life out about old histories and keep sighing about the ancients. I have too much vigor in my blood for that. In America is the place, the people, the opportunity for everything. I have become horribly radical. I am just going to India to see what I can do in that awful mass of conservative jellyfish and start a new thing, entirely new, simple, strong, new and fresh as the firstborn baby. The eternal, the infinite, the omnipresent, the omniscient is a principle, not a person. You, I, and everyone are but embodiments of that principle. And the more of this infinite principle is embodied in a person, the greater is he. And all in the end will be perfect embodiments of that. And thus all will be one as they are now essentially. This is all there is of religion. And the practice is through this feeling of oneness that is love. All old fogey forms are mere old superstitions. Now, why struggle to keep them alive? Why give thirsty people ditch water to drink when the river of life and truth flows by? This is only human selfishness, nothing else. Life is short, time is flying. That place and people where one's ideas work best should be the country and the people for everyone. Aye, for a dozen bold hearts, large, noble, and sincere. So with that, I will close, and I won't ask for questions, even if there are questions today, because I've already filled up the hour. I usually try to leave time at the end for question and answer, but that is over now. So I'll give announcement and then a closing prayer. We'll have the usual Bhagavad Gita class on Tuesday at 7:30 in the evening, live streamed. Thursday, we'll have the usual Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class at 11 o'clock in the morning, live streamed. And next Sunday, I will speak on Ganesha. Again, I've started several series, and one of the series I've started is Hindu gods and goddesses. That was at the request of one of you. And so recently I spoke on Saraswati. Last month I spoke on Saraswati as the first in that series. This next Sunday I will speak on Ganesha, and as time goes on, we'll come to other gods and goddesses. I'm not going in a particular order, except I did choose Saraswati first because she's the goddess of wisdom, and so it's her blessing that brings all blessings. And Ganesha, because he is worshipped first in when we take up any undertaking, we worship Ganesha first for his blessings, for success. But he's an ancient deity with a very interesting history and interesting aspects. And so that will be next week. Yes. Yes, what is that?
He also liked the most about Americans the idea of organization based on which he...
Yes. Yes, so Surin Rasogi said that another thing Swamiji loved about America was organization. So yes, he came home from being out in Chicago one day. He was staying with the Lyons family during the Parliament of Religions. And so one day he had been out and he came home and told Mrs. Lyons, not the, actually I forget her name. I knew the granddaughter, and it was her mother, who was the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Lyons. So I don't remember her married name. So, a Conger. No, that was, yeah, I think it was a Conger was her mother's name. Anyway, he came home and said, today I've fallen in love. And so Miss Conger said to Swamiji, who was it? Or who is she? And Swamiji laughed and said, no, oh no, it was Mrs. Lyons. I'm sorry. Anyway, it doesn't matter for the story. But the grandmother of Cornelia Conger. So no, mother, it was not a woman. It was organization, because I've seen how much good can be done through organization. And so it was that seeing the power of modern organization was something that Swamiji saw the great benefits from. He saw that there were problems with it also, that with every new thing there are problems also, but he saw that as far as setting in motion an idea if there's not an organization to support it and to sustain it, that the idea gradually loses its power. And so he formed the Ramakrishna Mutt and Ramakrishna Mission because of what he saw as the power of organization and the benefits of organization. So with that, I'll give a closing chant. Om madhuvatartayate madhuksharanti sindhavaha madhvirnasantoshadhihi madhunaktamutoshasi madhumatparthivagum rajaha madhudyarastu nah pita madhumandho vanaspatir madhumagum astu suryaha madhvirgavo bhavantu naha. Om madhu, om madhu, om madhu. For us who seek the truth, may the winds blow sweetly, may the rivers flow sweetly, may the herbs yield us sweetness. Sweet be the night and the break of day, sweet be the very dust of the earth. May the heavens pour down sweetness upon us. May the trees, lords of the forest, bear us sweetness. May the sun shed its sweetness upon us. May all the directions pour forth sweetness. Om, sweetness, sweetness, sweetness.